Well, sadly, this has all been predictable. I know we all hold out hope that something like this won't happen. I myself did. That there's always, that chance that someone like Vladimir Putin will make a different decision because he had a lot of options on the table. Very sadly, he'd also been premeditating this. In other words, this contingency plan for a full-on invasion of Ukraine had been thought through, probably going back for several years. I would say most certainly to the period when the annexation of Crimea took place in 2014, because we've seen an awful lot of exercises that have been, prelude to what we've been seeing over the last few days. And of course, we've just had a whole series of exercises that were declared in the last couple of months, which were the game changer for many people like myself watching this, because it was clear that these exercises were a preparation for an offensive action or an invasion. They weren't the usual kinds of exercise that we carry out as well, which is more for defensive means, in case we come under attack. So the way that the Biden administration was warning about this, getting out, ahead of everything, they were spot on. It just takes, of course, for people, some time for that to fully process. And this is one of the problems of warning about events. I think we're all, well aware of how difficult it is to tell somebody to watch out on something. But if it doesn't happen, then people think, well, you were just exaggerating or this wasn't accurate. In this case, very sadly, it's proven to be true. But of course, the hope was that in warning about it, you might be able to head it off to dissuade him from doing this. But I think we can see that Putin had made up his mind that he was going to go into Ukraine one way or another. Well, there are several things to bear in mind about Vladimir Putin. First of all, he's been in power now for 22 years, so it's not like he's just appeared on the scene. So a lot of us have been watching him for a very long time. And I think that there's something that holds true throughout history. If you look at people who've been in power for a very long time, they start to get deluded about their own role in history, their own role in their society. They kind of think of themselves as indispensable. And they also start to think of themselves as infallible. And so this is always a very dangerous period when someone's been in power for so long, where they start to make mistakes. And one can say that this has been a miscalculation, although Putin, of course, will try to turn it the other way. But I think that this is at the root of some of the issues that we're looking at today. Somebody who's been in power, and also in a very unchecked manner for such a long time. Because over the last 22 years that he has been in power, he's recently amended the constitution to stay theoretically in power even longer, out till 2036, for example. He isn't a member of a political party, so there's nothing really to rein him in the political system. He's turned the Russian parliament into basically a rubber stamp parliament. There's no checks from the court system. There's no equivalent of a Supreme Court. There's a constitutional court. And the only thing is really his popularity among the Russian people. And up until now, his popularity has been pretty high. And the last time he had an invasion of Ukraine, which is in 2014 when he annexed the peninsula of Crimea, his popularity ratings went through the charts. So I think he was anticipating that, particularly as a result of Russian propaganda inside of the country itself, that people will accept what he's done, the justification for it, and that obviously if it was a short, victorious war and the Ukrainians were taught a lesson, that then that might assist him in his popularity. Because in 2024 he has to be re-elected to be the president. Now I've just sort of said that he's been kind of unchecked power, but he has to prove that he's really popular to be legitimate, because everything rides on his popularity, including his grip on the circle of people around him. And the circle of people around him are really significant here as well, because Putin is a former KGB operative. And, as they say, once in the KGB, also always in the KGB. And many of the people in his inner circle, which is a very small inner circle, are also from the intelligence and security ministries or agencies. And it seems that they, together with Putin, have made this decision to go into Ukraine. So these are the hard men of the Russian political scene, and those around them who might be more technocratic or from the foreign ministry and who are not from those agencies really haven't had much ability to put pressure on Putin in this circle. And the other thing to remember is that these guys are ruthless. So you think back of all the things that the Russian security services have done, poisoning people, including with polonium and Novichok, clampdowns on popular dissent, all kinds of assassinations around Europe, and many of the other kind of dirty tricks, infiltration and interference, including in our elections in 2016 and other efforts, to sway public opinion around Europe. And you start to see that this is somebody who's pretty ruthless and really wants to make sure that by whatever means that they have at their disposal, that they will be able to turn the situation to their advantage. Well, one thing to bear in mind about what's happening in Ukraine is Ukraine has been an independent sovereign country for 30 years. So it's not like Ukraine was Taiwan, for example, in the case of China, which we've never really recognized as being independent. You know, there's been a sort of acceptance that, okay, it has de facto independence, but it's still kind of theoretically part of, you know, the larger Chinese political space, although, you know, obviously that's quite different. But this then puts that in the spotlight as well. Clearly the people of Taiwan don't want to be reabsorbed back into the Chinese system. They don't see themselves like Hong Kong, for example, that was just all leased, you know, from the British government and then turned back over again. And they're extraordinarily nervous that what Putin is doing in Ukraine, which is an independent sovereign country, could pave the way for Chinese action taken against them. There's also, if you think about around the world, pretty much every country, modern country in Africa, in South Asia, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you know, a whole host of other countries that were all kind of parts of larger entities, have only just got their independence since either World War II or quite recently in some cases since the end of the Cold War. Same in Europe. Most countries that we think of today, from Poland to Hungary, Austria and others, they became independent countries after World War I, and again more after World War II and after the Cold War. So basically what Putin is saying is that doesn't matter. You know, I don't care if this you know, country is independent. If it was once part of, you know, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, you know, I have a right to dominate it in some fashion. So we have to start to think about this as a sort of post-colonial invasion. And I think, you know, for example, the leadership of Kenya have actually made a note of this, because this would be like, you know, for example, the British deciding to, you know, kind of invade any of the former colonies, including Ireland, by the way, which was one of the original British colonies. So if you start to kind of think through your mind, if you take Ukraine and Russia out of this and think about what this could be like, it's actually fairly shocking and easy to see the much larger precedents that this could set. So it's important for the rest of the world to speak out against this, because Putin is really saying that none of the rules after World War II matter at all, and that basically if a country is stronger than its neighbour and has a territorial claim over it, then, you know, you have the right to act if you can create sufficient of a pretext. Well, I think what we have to do is really keep getting this outrage, not just moral outrage, but also with some practical effect from the rest of the world. I mean, I think we have to hold actually China to account as well, because China very clearly stood on Russia's side just in the few days leading up to the invasion. There was a major statement that was made by President Xi of China as well as President Putin on the margins of the Beijing Olympics. Now, did China know that Putin was going to invade Ukraine? Certainly the US government told them. And, you know, we've heard from the press recently that the Chinese discounted that and even told the Russians that actually the US had come to them, you know, with this intelligence. Well, the Chinese obviously were going to have to accept the fact that Putin and Russia have invaded Ukraine now. And China, for example, one of the pillars of its position in international affairs has been independence and sovereignty, precisely because it doesn't want anyone to recognize Taiwan, which broke away, you know, during the whole communist revolution from the rest of China. So we have to keep, you know, for example, diplomatically pushing China. There are other countries that abstained in the United Nations, like India. India's got major disputes with China in the Himalayas, and of course disputes with Pakistan and other neighbours over you know, territory and boundaries. Excuse me. And you know, one of the issues that we're going to have, or one of the issues we're going to have to press is how do we keep up this international momentum? So it's not just a question of sanctions, but countries pushing back. We've seen companies, international companies that have invested in Russia, suspending their operations. Western officials, former officials, or prominent business people who've been on the boards of Russian companies stepping back. We need to see more of that. There just has to be a concerted message from the rest of the world that this isn't right. Because again, it opens up not just the proverbial Pandora's box, but a whole set of precedents that are going to be set for other countries to take similar action. And these may be smaller countries. Look, I mean, right now we've got Saudi Arabia completely clobbering Yemen and nobody's paying attention, but that's more likely to spark off these kinds of regional conflicts as well. And this is not dissimilar from what Saddam Hussein did in Iraq in 1990, not our invasion of Iraq in 2003, but in 1990 when Saddam Hussein moved into Kuwait, saying Kuwait wasn't a real country. Kuwait was just drawn on the map by French and British and other officials after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. He had a right to take Kuwait back, and of course was an international response against that too. So we have to kind of think on all of these different fronts. The kind of protests that we see with students and other people, members of the Ukrainian communities around the world. It has to be a kind of a full spectrum, basically protest against what Russia's doing, with something more than just the United States standing on its own with its allies applying sanctions. Well, especially is here at the moment, but it's not just here, it's around Europe as well. I mean, Putin has become a kind of iconic figure for the kind of populist strongman. Not just strong man, but also, I suppose, strong women, because he's got some supporters in other places as well. But I think as this goes on, and just what's already happened, the carnage in basically Ukrainian villages and towns and major cities, all of the refugees, he's claiming that Ukraine is part of Russia and that Ukrainians and Russian are one people. So this is basically an abomination, if you think about it, and fratricide. You might even call it suicide if that's actually the case. So is that what populist strong men and women think is the outcome? I think there was an awful lot of people in the US and in Europe and more broadly who looked to Putin when he wasn't doing anything, because they thought he was just flexing muscles and kind of intimidating people. But he was asserting that basically might makes right, and now we see what the consequences of this are. So I would hope that when the political figures who have basically praised Putin, and many of our political commentators look at this, that they might say, well, okay, well, that actually could be one of the consequences. I mean, do we really want to see a war launched on neighbouring countries, or on people that we say are basically kin to us, and yet but they don't think the same way or want the same things that we do? Because I mean, basically Putin is saying, I don't want Ukrainians to run themselves. I mean, this is totally against other people's freedom of choice and their desires to just live like they want to live. And Putin's saying, no, I don't accept that. I don't accept that you Ukrainians have the right to make choices. And so he's actually doing the exact opposite of what people here and elsewhere have said that he stands for. So I'm hoping that, just as you're saying, that the divisions within our own societies that have led some to decide to be supportive of Putin will be overcome by actually seeing the atrocities that Putin is carrying out, because this is antithetical to the reasons that people were looking to him in the first place. Well, that's actually a really good question about information, because part of the war that we're in the middle of right now is a propaganda war. I would, urge people to really check and verify where that information is coming from. I mean, we've got all of the governments of Russia and Ukraine engaged in propaganda. The Russians have had a head start on everyone, because I mean they've been interfering in our elections and our political system and other political systems for years now. Just be very careful when you're looking for information to verify the sources. What I do is I read all kinds of different things. I have a few kind of go-to sources, but I'm always very careful to then look down and say, who's this coming from? I mean, even stuff that my mum sends to me, to click. I take a strong look, because I'm thinking, what's she sending to me? Where did she get this from? I always use a kind of like a GPS system. Kind of basically kind of looking to figure out, to orient yourself where you are. And I mean, major networks, for example, I often look at the BBC first, because there's still, a certain amount of editorial control. Look to see what they're saying just as a baseline, or the wire services, and then go out from there to kind of see, well, how much is this, kind of meshing with other things that I'm reading out there. But, just to everybody right now as well, be very careful about your own personal cybersecurity, because we're seeing a lot of cyber attacks, denials of service, phishing attempts. I mean, places like where I work at think tanks, major news organisations, but people in universities and colleges. I think everyone has to be really very careful now, because the information war has really spread. And there's also ransomware attacks and things that people should be worried about, because as Putin sees that others are protesting and starting to resist what he's going to do, he's going to be trying to sort of fight back through these kinds of information means as well.